Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another episode of My Adventures in Role-Playing. And today, my topic is going to be TSR campaigns that I either didn't get to play enough of or really wished I got to play in the first place. So, we'll start off single alphabetical because it's easier. Dark Sun. Dark Sun was a campaign of basically campaign world whereby magic tended to destroy the environment around it. It was a giant desert planet. The races were a little bit different because you had these half dwarf, half human. They're called mules. The three green were a race. It was very brutal. Steel was almost impossible to find. All your weapons were bone or obsidian. If you had a steel weapon, it was a big deal. Your armor was chitin from insects or hide or leather. There was a lot of psionics in the world. Everybody had a wild talent, and then there were psionicists, in the truest sense of the word, being basically integrated into the series. It was a very, very different take on fantasy role playing from any of the stuff that TSR had done. That typically tended to be in the sword and sorcery world. It was very, very interesting. It had played with the same mechanics. The only thing that was different is that because the world was as brutal as it was, they recommended when you made a character, you technically made three. Three characters that knew each other and were connected in some way, shape, or form, and that whenever you leveled up the other characters, so that essentially when your character died, which was almost a certainty, you had a tangential character, brother, cousin, long lost friend, whatever, that you could bring in to basically fill in that spot. So you didn't have to start from fresh and basically not have a character that you knew nothing about. I really liked the campaign, and I got to play it for a while when it came out in early 90s. However, the campaign group I was playing it with pretty much collapsed, and never got picked up again. Dark Sun became sort of a thing in the past. D&D First Edition kind of went away. There was no third edition version of Dark Sun, so therefore it wasn't playable without serious conversion. And the edition that shall not be named did have a campaign setting in this, but that pretty much doesn't exist in my recollection. And of course, now in 5th edition, they've done nothing with it. There's little or no. There's some homebrew sites you can find, but it'd be one of those worlds that if I could get back into it, I would gladly do it. So that's the Dark Sun. Dragonlance is my second choice. I never really got to play much of the original Dragonlance campaign. I played a little bit of the first module, and the biggest complaint that we had with that module was it was very, very railroady, and I believe the second module was even more so. I was playing Flint Fireforge, dwarf surprise, and it was a good story certainly, but once you read the novels, the modules weren't quite as entertaining because you kind of saw the through line. But I would like to play in the campaign because I think it's very rich. It has a lot of interesting stuff. What I would like to do is Margaret Weiss and Don Perrin basically redid Dragonlance for 3rd edition. It was done independent. It used the open game license, but it is very much the third edition, and I have the entire Dragonlance campaign in 3 books. Autumn Twilight, Winter's Night, Spring's Dawning. And they're all 3.5 or 3.0 compatible, and so I would like to run it because I know the story, and I'd like to run it for my kids because they don't know the story. And then that way the railroadiness hopefully will have been written out, and because they won't know the story, they're not going to be, oh, this is where this happens. Like all the major events won't step in and interfere with their enjoyment. So that's Dragonlance in a nutshell. Planescape. I completely missed Planescape when it came out. I didn't even know it existed, um, simply because that was towards the tail end of my role playing before I took my hiatus, and it came out, but ever since then with the Torment PC game and some various other things, I've gotten into it, and it's like it has a very, very rich world and a very, very rich concept, being, basically a campaign that's designed to be multiplanar as opposed to just existing in one world. And having that aspect, and then of course the language that goes along with it, the art that went along with it. It was very, very rich and very, very evocative. And I'd like to try a campaign that is planar. Uh, I'm not entirely certain if there was any modules for the Planescape world. I will have to double check. But I'm pretty certain there is no campaign in the truest sense of the word. So this is the kind of thing where I'd have to build something entirely on my own, or have someone have already built it. And again, there is no 3.5 version of it, but then again, there doesn't need to be, because it's a lot more of style and substance than it has to do with necessarily nitty-gritty rules. So I think it's easily something that you could just take and throw into to any version of the rule set that you wanted. And so I like to play in it simply because it has such a rich and diverse concept, and you can play with anything at that point. You're not stuck with a pure, fight and fantasy world. You could be floating through the abyss, floating through limbo, trying to find your way quickly out of the plane of fire before you're completely consumed. Like lots of things like this. That would be a lot different story or different concept, especially considering being a planar game. You're probably expecting there to be planar scope events, which are going to be far more grandiose and far more like, whoa! So you probably, even your low-level characters probably would have some interesting impacts on the universe as a whole. And then the last one that I'll make mention of, which is my number one favorite campaign world in the TSR world, is Ravenloft. I absolutely love their interpretation of the gothic horror, or at least the fantasy horror meme. The original module, of course, was amazing. And then, of course, when they made it into a whole box set, I bought the box set as quickly as I could. And I bought some of the modules that went with it at that time. But I've never really gotten anybody to actually play in the world with me, because it's hard to do horror well, because you're going to have to reinvent some of the stuff, like skeletons, rather than just being a nuisance. Like they're actually like, a dead body that's been removed from flesh and has been, and is walking around doing stuff. There is some terror to that. And what I like about the Ravenloft rules is the idea that they introduce a little bit more of the horror and the actual, like, what if you really saw this? Like, it would be disturbing. There was an entire line of Ravenloft made for 3.0 and 3.5 by Sword and Sorcery, again through the Open Gaming License. I bought up all of those books. They are really, really good. I like their Gazetteer series. It gives a lot of richness to the worlds that they're in. Right now I'm watching a podcast on YouTube, Hour of the Raven. And it's doing an excellent job of basically walking you through the realms, initially as a travelogue, and then as you go further along in the episodes, it goes into the secrets of the actual places, and then the DM level stuff, and gives you a warning, so if you want to play it, you shouldn't watch them. But Ravenloft is an incredibly rich world. It goes everywhere from near Stone Age, people. Then you've got the whole Egyptian concept to it. Then you've got regular fantasy world places, and then you work your way up to places that are near industrial, like late 1700 kind of timeline. And then you've also got places like Bloodspur, which is basically a nightmare realm run by mind flayers. As if that isn't in and of itself scary enough. So I own all the Ravenloft novels. I've read almost all of them. They are pastiches of various concepts, like Adam is basically the Frankenstein monster. Strahd, of course, is the vampire. Harkin Lucas is the wolf wearer. Instead of being a werewolf, he's a wolf wearer. He's a wolf that turns into a man rather than a man who turns into a wolf. There's the Hunchback kind of story. There's the Jekyll and Hyde story. A lot of now they're not like retellings of those stories. They are pastiches. They are basically taking those concepts and doing their own work on them. Like the best example is the Jekyll and Hyde story. Is the Hyde is the criminal mastermind of the realm, and the Jekyll is the guy who's constantly hunting for the criminal mastermind, not realizing that he himself is the criminal mastermind. It's just his alternate personality, who does know that the other guy is the cop. So essentially, it's one of those things where the bad guy is always a step ahead because he always knows where you're stepping. So as a result, those are the campaigns that were published by TSR initially in first edition, and then some of them were republished in 3.5 by other groups that I would like to get back into. I'd like to play with my family, my friends, and check out the worlds that they inhabit, because they are very rich and they're very interesting. And I don't like the fact that 5th edition has effectively abandoned them all, including the other ones that I didn't necessarily want to play, like Alchemy or Spelljammer, Mistar. Those things didn't catch my attention as much. But, to a certain extent, I'd almost wish that they'd reconsider, opening up those worlds. Ravenloft, they kind of did with the one book, The Curse of Strahd, but that's just one book. That's not the world. That's Barovia, which is one of many, many complicated and interesting lands. Anyways, until next time, if you want to tell me I'm a complete idiot, so you can email me at ratnef@gmail.com, RATENEF @gmail.com, and we'll talk to you again soon.